Hey everybody, this is Sonny Wasserman back for the 272nd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. For those of you who care to remember, we began during the election of 2020 and we're now in our sixth election season. This one promises to end the world one way or the other. We got 31 people starting with us, and we're engineered by Steve Caruso and co-hosted by Mike Hirsch and MYLA RESON and some other really great people. We're going to start today with the media. We've got two truly great figures in the American media or the global media, David Saltman and Karl Grossman. We're also going to be joined by John Brakey and some other truly terrific people to deal with what's happening to the American media, which is pretty apocalyptic when you get right down to it. We're also going to be talking. The Supreme Court issued some apparently contradictory decisions today, but they're very, very big ones, having to do with voting and about regulatory agencies. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the billionaire ballot in California, which really just needs some discussion, especially since many of us on these calls are Californians. We're going to talk about data centers, ghost ballots, and a whole bunch of other stuff, which is really great. And I have got to tell my daughter to call me back. Hey, Abby, call me back. I'm on my Zoom call. Okay, I'll call you. So we got, oh my God, we got 40 people with us already. And I am in New Jersey, as you can see in the background from the palm trees. Oh, look, there's Bruce Springsteen out swimming and surfing on the water there. So what we're going to do today, we're going to start. We're also going to talk about balcony solar in the second hour. We do go 2 full hours, and most of you actually stay with us for 2 full hours, which is really, really great. Today is June 29th, and we are celebrating the month of Little Bighorn. And we're going to talk about that too. George Armstrong Custer will not be joining us today, but his ghost lives on, as does that of Sitting Bull. So we're really ready to rock and roll here. We got David Saltman and in Riverdale, New York, and Karl Grossman on Long Island, who are real stalwarts of the media. And David looking Buddha-like as he always does. His David is a Tai Chi master. That's for real. And David, I've always respected that about you. I did see you take down some really big guys with your Tai Chi mastery, but what you really need to take down now is CBS News. David Saltman is a multi-award winning producer from the era when the media really, really mattered. And David actually co-produced stuff with Walter Cronkite and won a couple of big awards. And in my world, did a documentary about Woody Hayes, which is truly astounding. Those of you who know Woody Hayes will appreciate that. But David, we wanted to talk to you, and then to Karl. We're on the brink now of a mere half century in the major media. We're on the brink now of the unthinkable, which is that a billionaire, David Ellison, who you know actually personally, is about to combine CNN with CBS under the I can't we can't use four-letter words here on the so I don't know how to describe Barry Weiss, but BARI is a four-letter word, and she is about to take control of CNN as she has at CBS. And you know what's going on there, and you and I. She's a Yenta. I know David is very wise Yenta, but we've also discussed you and I privately this company called Versant, and Versant stands to become a major player. You say in our conversations, they're actually hiring journalists. Probably the only place in America that's hiring serious, credible journalists at this point. So, David, can you give us the view from the top here of what it really means for David Ellison to now control CBS, to about to control CNN, and what we can do to set up an alternative media? Can the people who care about the news actually set up an alternative media without billionaires? You have told me you think so, so let's hear it.
Ah, well, now you're asking me if that's a lot of questions to unpack here. Let's take the last one first. You didn't say, can you create it without money? You said without billionaires. That
Right.
those are two different concepts. And I would say the answer is yes, you can. And even given William Paley wasn't a billionaire when he created CBS, but let's say he was the equivalent of one back in 1928 or whatever that was. So, but the real let me think. We're talking about Versant. Let me just let's talk about Versant and about CNN and CBS. It's not crystal clear that Barry Weiss is going to be in charge of CNN when, in fact, if in fact the merger goes through, which it probably will, but that's not guaranteed either at this moment. Tomorrow or this afternoon, it could change. So we don't really know for sure that that's going to happen. They're now talking about pairing her up with a co-president or something like that, which is what they tried at CBS. And in my experience, that's probably a bad idea. I should just say not everybody in the audience has worked in these kind of media, and everybody, I think, especially when thinking about places like Pacifica and so on, they envision that the corporate structure and corporate governance is more or less of a mini democracy.
Ha!
Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is, in my opinion, I don't really think you can do it any other way. But I thought it, even at the time that I was younger and in the mix every day. CBS, for example, CBS News was fundamentally a paramilitary operation, and it had to be, because because the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite had to be on the air every single day at 6:30 New York time, come hell or high water. So whatever it took for you're out in Lebanon and you have to get your video to the feed point, which is on the border with Israel, and you're 2 hours away, and it's it's 2 minutes after 4 New York time. You might have to kill somebody to get there, And the name of the game was always get to the feed point, and then the name of the game was, get your tape in the system. Like I say, so the concept of a co-directorate, it's like having two generals, 5-star generals. There's only been one in American history, one 5-star general, and he was back in World War I. So I just want to disabuse everybody of that idea that there could be I just see Mike is writing on the thing. Aside from the fact that Barry Weiss is completely unqualified to even be, to do kitchen duty in this
Well,
army.
Salty, how would you evaluate what's happened to CBS since Ellison took it over?
That's a
And what are the prospects for CNN?
total disaster for CBS. Anderson Cooper quit 60 Minutes. Nobody does that. Scott Pelley was fired, but Cooper quit 60 Minutes. He's probably going to quit CNN. He was a landmark at CNN, and so on. So it's a disaster. Now the question is, can something replace that, or what else is there? And we're going to have to look somewhere else probably. I mean, and from my perspective, I should also say this in fairness to everything. It didn't just start recently. It's been going this way on a slippery slope. I started at CBS when Mr. Paley was running the company, the founder of the company. And I was there when Larry Tisch bought it. And that was and he immediately started to fire people. And that was the beginning of the end then. And that was I don't know, let's see, 1990. So that was, 30 plus years ago. And it was already starting to go that way. It didn't get, and then I went to CNN when Ted Turner was still running the company, the owner, the founder, the creator of cable TV, really. And same thing happened there. He got bought up by first the AOL merger, which was a colossal disaster, and then the Time Warner merger, which had its good points and bad points, but ended up the same way. Ted Turner lost control of the company, and the whole thing went to hell. So
in terms of Americans being informed,
yeah,
which is the root of democracy, dating all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and
right.
before.
Good.
How you mentioned to me a company called Versant.
Okay, now
You
Versant.
say it's hiring journalists. Who is Versant?
Yeah, Versant is a recently created spin-off of I want to say NBC, but that wasn't, of Comcast, which was the owner of NBC and all the NBC related properties, NBC, Universal, the theme parks, etc. Versant was a recently created spinoff, which includes in it a lot of the. It includes CNBC. It includes MS Now, which used to be called MSNBC, but the NBC letters are taken out of it now because it really doesn't have any more relation with NBC, except that it was spun off from NBC. So generally, in those cases, the parent company retains at least some kind of financial interest and maybe some other kind of interest. And it also has a bunch of other, there we go, USA Network, Golf Now, Rotten Tomatoes, Fandango. It's got several networks, the Golf Channel, and it looks, that looks to me like if you're looking to choose a group of companies that's going to bring in a lot of money, that's probably not a bad way to go. But the interesting part is MS Now, which is doing really quite well. Rachel Maddow's show, let me put it to you in one sentence. MS Now is beating the pants off CNN. Okay?
Really?
In terms of viewership. Rachel Maddow, her show is doing twice as well as any show on CNN. So that's a good thing. MS Now, because a lot of the people were connected to NBC, is going to be hiring new people. There are lots of unemployed top class producers out there. It's not clear who's going to be the big player, but it might be a good time for out of work producers. If I were 30 years younger, I'd be out looking for a job and hoping for real money. So
well, the big one that everybody wonders, and of course the question is, will he wind up there? Is Stephen Colbert? Is Stephen Colbert going to wind up at Versant?
I have not heard anything to that, and I don't really, just on the face of it, see a particularly good place for him there. I mean, he could make it whatever he wanted, I'm sure, but I haven't heard anything to that effect. I think he's probably just. But I'm glad you mentioned Stephen Colbert, because I think that there is a way to go that actually applies to your idea of the Solartopia network and applies to Stephen Colbert and sort of answers the question of, can you do this without billionaires? Okay. As I think that Stephen Colbert lives in New Jersey, right? He does.
Not around the corner from me, but yes, I think he does. Yeah.
But actually, it's not that far from you. It's about a 40-minute drive from you. He lives in a place called Montclair, And Montclair is not far from Newark. And it's,
Well, of course, you know who lived in Montclair was Yogi Berra, but
of
that's a different.
course, yeah.
So
Yeah,
we now have the state of New Jersey has two of the most prominent dissonant voices in America, Stephen Colbert and Bruce Springsteen.
but
Springsteen also lives in New Jersey.
you're gonna love this idea. Yeah, and also right. So Stephen Colbert lives there, and Springsteen, and
Oh,
there.
the guy from Saturday Night Live, married to Scarlett Johansson. They also live in New Jersey.
That's right. I think they do live. That's right. I forgot about that guy. Um, anyway, what's happened in Montclair, I'm finding extremely interesting because a couple of things happen at the same time. This hasn't gotten any publicity anywhere. We may be announcing it for the first time on this broadcast. I don't even know. But
Colin Jost, that's right. Colin Jost. Mike Chris got
yeah, a lucky man. Um, so what's also happened there is that New Jersey Public Television, which used to be based in Trenton, the capital, has moved its headquarters to Montclair, New Jersey. And Montclair State University, which is one of the best state universities in the New Jersey system, has there at its headquarters in Montclair what would we call this? The television broadcasting team that just won first prize in the nation as the best collegiate news team in the country. And this very interesting operation is run by a former 60 Minutes producer named Steve McCarthy. He's the guy who made the movie about Jimmy Breslin that came out a year or two ago.
So the question then becomes, David Saltman, how does this impact the news gathering capability of the American journalism scene? I mean, we've CBS, CNN, they've all gone, they're going down the corporate drain. How do we get in? And they got rid of Colbert. How do the American people get informed now going forward, independent of billionaires?
Right. You don't need so we remember so just keep this in mind about Montclair, and then let's talk about a news gathering operation that has made its money without billionaires and has made serious money and is still doing it. I'm talking about ProPublica. We talked about that before. ProPublica is the investigative reporting outlet that's run by a former editor of the Wall Street Journal, a guy named Paul Steiger. And ProPublica's money comes from, very much like a lot of nonprofits, it's somewhat from participants and so on, but its main money comes from family foundations. And the main family foundation that is responsible for their budget is, I wrote down the name because I can never remember. This is called the Stelter Foundation. Have you heard of that one?
No.
Well, the Stelter Foundation is really interesting because it was started. It used to be. Do you remember a bank called Washington Mutual?
Yes, they used to do socially responsible investing.
Sorry, say again.
They did socially responsible investing.
Correct. The Washington Mutual was at first a mutual savings and loan society started by the Stelter family. I forgot the guy's name. William Stelter and his wife, I think. The wife just died, and William himself just died a few years ago. But the family is still running the thing. And it went from being a very small, it started out on the West Coast. It went from being a small savings and loan. And it grew, and as you know, or maybe you don't know, but savings and loans in this country, savings and loan is a very unique American institution. And the reason that they're unique is because of what happened to Washington Mutual. Washington Mutual was like all these they were like little community banks, and they existed so that people would be able to buy real estate. The Quakers actually started this concept. They wanted people to buy farms. If you look at the history of savings and loans, it's like reading Mark Twain. It's all up and down the Mississippi. It's it's a real imprint of Americana. Anyway, because of the unique structure of these organizations, they were called mutual organizations. They were legally allowed if they changed business form, they were allowed to become public companies. In other words, to trade on the stock market. And when the individuals who were just farmers and, they weren't indigent people, but they weren't rich. They were just average middle class, people who were trying to band together and pool their money in order to help people get farms or to get meetings.
So this bank now funds ProPublica?
Yes.
And you say ProPublica makes money?
ProPublica's budget is well above $30 million a year.
So but in terms of the big media, that's a drop in the bucket. Can we actually find a formula that will give us an alternative to CBS and CNN that will actually contradict the great dictator Donald Trump? I mean, my view is that CBS is now to Trump what Pravda was to Stalin.
Right.
I mean, we're getting there, right?
Yeah.
MYLA RESON wanted to jump in, and then we're going to go, David, to your cohort here, Karl Grossman, who also is big in the media in New York. Go ahead, MYLA, and then we'll go to Karl. And David, this is really fascinating stuff. Thank you. Keep with us, please. Go ahead, MYLA.
And for those of us who can actually see behind me, I have the Flamingo Revolution. The people in the streets of Albania have been on the streets for weeks, and they've constructed these beautiful pink flamingo cutouts that they carry when they march against the corrupt leader of Albania, who made this extraordinarily bad deal of signing away an ecological preserve. But I digress. In terms of funding, the model that has been adopted and is a pretty, not such a great model, but it's the one that they're using, is crowdfunding. There are a lot of people who have migrated from CNN, from CBS, but we're talking some big names like Jim Acosta and Don Lemon, and some really great people like Katie Fang and Anderson Cooper. I mentioned Don Lemon, Wajahat Ali, who was a regular CNN contributor, have all migrated over to a social media platform called Substack, and I believe Alison Greene's on there as well. And there seems to be some kind of a deal between Substack and YouTube, where the shows that are initially live streamed without commercial interruption are then also placed on YouTube. So that's one of the places that seems to be fairly popular, especially with younger people, and a lot of independent journalists. I know that Wajahat Ali was on today talking about how it's a really precarious situation with respect to funding, and a lot of the people, the better known journalists who are using Substack are relying on their savings, I think, and on crowdfunding, and so it's an interesting situation with respect to the funding.
Yeah, well, we're in a situation now where the billionaires and to have taken over the media that we used to know, that was when Dave Saltman was in his heyday. And the question going forward is, what's the alternative? We do have Karl Grossman with us. Karl works with Free Speech TV, and Karl, can you tell us about Free Speech TV and your own Enviro Video and how you get that around?
Yeah, it's Free Speech TV. Folks on this call should check it out. It's out of Denver. And on Free Speech TV, for example, Amy Goodman gets her show syndicated. Tom Hartman gets his show syndicated. I get my show syndicated. It reaches, well, my show is on 200 cable systems in 40 states. Dish Network, DirecTV, Sling, also we're on YouTube. And I've been doing it since 1991. And just, in terms of my perspective, if I could just mention that for also a long time, over 30 years, I've been on the board of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. In fact, I'm its secretary, and I do media criticism, write it for FAIR. Just in a nutshell, what's involved now, I believe, is a full-bore attempt led by the Trump people, Bannon and all these people too involved, to suppress and to control U.S. media. Now, there is a precedent there. Sometimes everybody knows about the muckraking era, muckraking, the earlier word for investigative reporting. How did that end? The muckraking era? It ended with John D. Rockefeller and
Morgan.
J.P. Morgan buying into media. And now, however, there's even a more insidious situation because you have the government allied with these forces. When Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, threatens, affiliate licenses, I mean, there's the government hitting at the jugular of media. Further in terms of my background, I taught a course for many decades. I retired last year as a full professor from the State University of New York, but I taught a course for many decades, called Politics of Media. I have a graduate degree from New School in media theory. So I know a little bit about media. In addition, I was the co-anchor at a commercial Long Island station for 5 years, WSNL TV. I was the chief investigative reporter at WVVH TV. I had a weekly program on WLIW. That's a PBS station on Long Island. I also reported for Pacifica as a Long Island correspondent. So I got a fairly good handle on media after all these years. The playbook is Orban's in Hungary, how he shut down and manipulated media. And I'm not too optimistic about this whole business. What I'd suggest is dealing with just what MYLA just mentioned, what Jim Acosta has done and Don Lemon have done. And they've gone to Substack. I also have a blog on Substack to try to work around the edges. But the attack on a free press, on an independent press in the United States, is the most intense in history. And they think they're going to get away with it. And if the Trump people, stay in power, in my view, they will get away with it.
Well, we do have some state attorneys general who are opposing the Ellison takeover of CNN and the merger of CBS with CNN. Dave Saltman, how significant would it be if CNN and CBS merge, and then I'm going to go to Steve Caruso and Ruth Strauss. But how big a deal is this?
David, you're muted. Everybody's muted except Carl.
When I was working at both of those places, that was considered the nightmare scenario, that they would ever merge. Oh my God, what a disaster that would be. I'm not sure that's true anymore, but at the time it was considered horrifying. We used to, and I was wrong about this, but in 1980, when I heard that Ted Turner was starting an all news television network, I, like everybody else, all my colleagues, we laughed. We thought he was crazy. And he looked crazy. Honestly, I don't know if you remember this, Carl, but when Ted Turner started covering the United Nations, do you remember this? You know how he did it? I mean, the normal way would be, in fact, Richard Roth, who he eventually hired, is still at the United Nations for CNN. But before he found Richard Roth, he put a camera outside on 42nd Street and what is that, East End Avenue, and just let the camera roll 24 hours a day, showing a picture of the Secretariat building. That was his coverage of the UN, like an outdoor exterior shot running 24 hours a day. So it really was a joke. But let me just say, we'll comment on all these guys on Substack, and Democracy Now! is a good show. I would call it a pretty mainstream, well done news broadcast. But this is not what you're asking. This means that the viewer has to pick and choose from a giant marketplace of offerings. I'm going to watch Don Lemon today, and I'm going to watch this guy tomorrow, and so on. That's not the same as getting it all presented to you on one big news broadcast, or even in one place. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, what journalists do is watch all that stuff and try to be aware of where the smart people are and what they're saying, and and even more importantly, going on location, or at least getting on the phone and saying, "Hey, what's going on in your place?" But let me put out a couple of ideas that don't require that from the viewer, and that might enable a kind of something like the CBS Evening News or CNN, or however people want to view it. I mentioned these before briefly, so I'm just going to give you a bullet points, but one of them we'll talk about in greater length. We talked about ProPublica. This would be something that if, for example, Solartopia or this broadcast or any left-leaning or any leaning anyway could do. Combination of grants, donations, and the key is family foundations. You're not chasing the billionaire grants. You're going in a different area and the Sandler Foundation, and there's one or two other ones that really are the main financiers of ProPublica, and it's done really well for them. The other one we talked about, news guilds, and about making a network out of labor union. Here, my concept is this: is there such a thing as a news intelligence gathering network that's already in place that just doesn't know that it could be used as a broadcast network? And I'm thinking that the research departments of labor unions is one such thing. All they do is research. Of course, they're focused on their business and whatever, but if you've ever dealt with labor unions, these people are super smart, and they're all over the world, and they have heft. And that would be one place, and I think they might be interested in it because it would be good for their own publicity. So that's another one. Number 3, we talked about the Bloomberg terminal. The Bloomberg organization has a very unique funding method that has been able, and Bloomberg wasn't a billionaire when it started. He invented this terminal, which made him into a billionaire, and he made it the centerpiece of his network, which is not funded the normal way by advertising. It's funded by promotion of the terminal itself. And you can't live in the finance world without a Bloomberg terminal. And his television network and radio network is not considered a profit center in his business. So that's another way to go. I know you have to be smart enough to invent a terminal or something like that. But there's another way to go if you have something like that at the center of gravity. And the last one is, and I think this is doable, and that's what I was getting to about Montclair. There are hundreds or maybe even thousands of college radio and television stations. And a lot of them are quite good. Many of them. The one in Ann Arbor was really good, for example, WCBN. The guy who started WCBN back in our day went on to create I'm blanking on the name. What's the channel that's all Congress all the time? C-SPAN. He went on to start C-SPAN, and the same guy. Anyway, what I'm thinking is you could have a joint venture or a cooperative venture between a network of college and university and other nonprofit stations, which could include Pacifica or not, or any of these other networks, which go all over the country, and they could all be focused on Montclair and run by this Montclair State guy, who I happen to know very well, and who is an absolute top man in this business.
Well, so Salty, what we're looking for, Steve Bannon was very clear that his number one priority was to take over the media.
Yeah.
And they've done it now. They've done it with CBS, CNN. But there does, as you say now, we have Versant, we have Bloomberg, we have Pacifica, we have Democracy Now!, Tom Hartman, Karl Grossman, Free Speech TV. There is a menu of a big list of alternative media, and we have the internet, which we never had before. I mean, nobody has the internet, but it does exist. So the question is, how do we find a center of gravity, or is there a center of gravity that can now stand up to CNN and CBS, which are tools of the billionaires? I mean, that's the question.
You have to make one.
Yeah, well, there we go. Let's give Steve.
You have to know how on this broadcast to make one.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, as they say. Go ahead, Steve Caruso, Ruth Strauss, and then we'll go back to Carl.
Yeah, you just got to pull their funding. It's Check My Ads. We had them on the show here once, and they go out and find the right-wing venues and call the advertiser and say, hey, what are you guys doing, advertisers? Why are you supporting these whack job fascists? Carl, not Carl, David, the Washington Mutual is an investment fund now. It's not a bank anymore.
Right.
So it's a fund. Okay. Yeah, because I looked up on Wikipedia and I'm like, oh, okay. I figured it out.
No, they sold, they became Chase. I think Chase bought them up.
Yeah, Chase bought it 2008
God,
at the same day they bought Bear Stearns, right?
That's right. It was back then.
Yep.
That's right. I didn't mean to leave that impression.
Where's my union contract? I did that research while you were talking. Thanks.
But I think that foundation, that's when the family foundation started to get powerful.
Yeah.
And started to give away major league money because they made, it was a hugely successful one of these savings and loan operations. And they went public.
Okay. Ruth Strauss needs to be unmuted. And then MYLA has a hand, and we'll go back to Karl Grossman. Anybody else wants to give us the magic word here from Dave Saltman on how we set up an alternative network? Let's hear it. But we 20 years ago there was no internet, Dave, and so that's the difference now. We had no choice but to rely on CNN and CBS, but we may have an alternative universe here that could save us here. Ruth Strauss and then MYLA RESON.
Well, of course, we do have MS now, but the thing that bothers me is that I would love for all of these people to be able to make a living, but Mehdi Hassan left and started his Substack when MS Now, booted him. Then there's Ryan Grimm from The Intercept. Then there's Seymour Hersh, and it just goes on, and all of them want $60. There's the contrarian of the editors who left the Washington Post. So, we do need some kind of, it reminds me of the left was always splintered into a million groups, and now this is true for these people. I'm just kind of venting because, we do need some kind of consolidation. You cannot, financially subscribe to 20 of these different things. Thank you.
Right. And weirdly enough, there's another name in the mix, which is Murdoch. Murdoch has two sons, and one of them is a real right winger and not a good guy, but his other son, James, is apparently liberal enough that Murdoch tried to disown him. So I don't know here. What's going on? MYLA RESON?
Well, Ruth, I'm so glad that you mentioned Ryan Grimm. He now has drop site news, and it's phenomenal. The reporting that they have been doing, especially in the Gulf region, has been second to none as far as I'm concerned. And then you've got to give it to Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, based in Doha, Qatar, and I guess they're relying on billionaires or big money in order to fund their operation. But they do employ journalists, and they provide some of the most important reporting around the world, especially in Africa. They've been reporting nonstop on the outbreak of Ebola in Central Africa, and a lot of very important international news that we're not finding journalists who are actually getting paid to cover these issues anywhere but Al Jazeera. And I know that when Ryan Grimm was talking about the funding that they get, because they also have reporters, they say that it's crowdfunding, and they have some very generous contributors who think that their reporting and their journalism is so worthwhile that they're willing to fund it. And just like Ruth said, it's just impossible for most people to pay to keep these various independent journalists afloat, the ones who are relying on crowdfunding, because it's all kind of atomized. It's not.
Well, yeah, you got the right word there, MYLA. Atomized. I mean, CBS and CNN, they each get what, 9-10 million viewers on a regular basis. And no, I'm sure that Ryan Grimm and I don't know about Al Jazeera, but Ryan Grimm is not going to get 9 or 10 million. I wish he would. I don't even know how many Amy Goodman gets or Tom Hartman gets. So the question then becomes, what's the center of gravity? Is there a center of gravity in terms of the media? CBS was the center of gravity for a long time, along with ABC and NBC. But those days are gone. What's going to replace it? Carl, you taught media studies. What replaces the center of gravity in the American media?
I think, but I don't know if it'll have the circulation, is going digital, like so much of the society. And I think that might be the direction. For example, interestingly enough, as a model, the muckraking era started with magazines that just came out of nowhere, particularly McClure's magazine. And most of the mainstream press, with the exception of the Scripps newspapers and the Pulitzer newspapers, have been compromised by big money and advertising and so forth. But like magically, out of in the media world came these magazines, which became Atlantic Magazine, incidentally, and others.
Yeah, Harper.
But I think today, if there's any model, it could be in the digital direction. But I don't know if that could really be a substitute to the mass circulation of, for example, Murdoch in his newspapers, or the viewership of the major networks.
That's the question that
Lost the audio.
everybody's treading water here. Nobody knows what's clearly CBS is
I'm
going
not
to
getting
lose.
anybody's audio.
What's that, Salty?
Salty, we can hear. Are you having trouble hearing?
He might have.
Apparently, Salty's
Asked
not
on
hearing
mute.
us.
So clearly CBS is going to go through the floor. Nobody's going. I mean, they're going to lose a huge quantity of their viewership. The comedy show, so-called comedy show, that replaced the time slot of Colbert, nobody's watching, right? I mean, Colbert went from that slot went from 4 million viewers to nothing, and the same is going to happen with the guy who took over the news chair, Tony, with an unpronounceable name. So, what replaces the media that we grew up with, that nurtured the Dave Saltmans and Carl Grossmans of the world?
Sonny, we have a bunch of questions
Yeah,
from different
go
people.
ahead, Carla, Lynn.
Vina was up early.
Oh, go ahead, Vina, and then Carla and Lynn, and we'll go back to Myla. And Carl, if you Salty, you want to jump in again? But this is what we're all struggling with. Everybody's treading water here.
Okay,
Vina Colley, did you want to say something? And then we'll go to Carla.
Vina dropped out. Oh, never mind. Sorry.
yeah, I was wondering, we just found 5,000 classified documents on the Piketon site in the plutonium. What would it take? We sent a letter to Taylor. What would it take to get those records unclassified? Because that's what's going to get us in RECA, and it's going to extend the compensation for the workers past 92 until the decommissioning is done.
Well, that's another question. We still have Cy Hirsch out there, the master of classified documents, and let's see if we can get him to him. But Cy Hirsch has a constituency. People read him. I subscribed. I paid for Cy Hirsch because I wanted to support him. But I have no idea how many readers he's got. And Substack, how many people are actually reading Substack? How many people listen to Amy Goodman? How many people listen to Tom Hartman? And if Colbert came back and put a show of his own on the internet, how many people would listen to him? Carla Sand, go ahead, and Lynn.
I do. I want to say something because I'm almost like a news junkie because I haven't heard anything about. All I hear is CBS and CNN, which I don't watch. I try ABC, PBS, DW, and the Japanese channel, and BBC. What I'm saying is they all sound the same. They're getting the news from some focal point, and they all. If I flip around, I can just almost say the news for them because it's the same. Doesn't anybody complain about that? I hear it all.
I don't know.
They're reading it off the Associated Press wire, which has been the standard of news gathering since 100 years.
Well, where do we stand with the AP and Reuters?
Still there. The AP is a collective. It's a collective. It's it's what you're asking about. How do you do this? You join forces, and every member, every newspaper or radio station or TV station that gets the AP service is required to give the news to the AP. Let me tell you, I'm thinking, you've never worked in the business. Let me tell you what it was like to work at 60 Minutes and Saturday Night Live. You know what?
Very quickly, Dave. We gotta stop.
It's to this point. It's to this point. The very first thing that you'd see when you walk into the office of Sunday Morning with Charles Curall was a whole stack of newspapers, all from different parts of the country. It was the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Denver Post, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, not a single New York paper. And the executive producers, who are really brilliant at this, would spend a lot of their time going through these papers looking for good local stories about to crest, in their opinion. And that's what they would be sending the reporters out to. And it seemed like they were geniuses. How did they get that story? They just read the local papers. They read the Akron Beacon Journal and the Philadelphia Daily News and so on.
Well, so now we have on the internet, we have all these other different feeds. And how do we get like a narrative, a unified narrative of any kind? This is the great, I think, the great mystery going forward. And a year from now, or two years from now, we may have an answer.
You could read the headlines off these papers and be that unifier.
Well, we have Counterpoint, Counterpunch, we have Common Dreams, we have
Nobody
Rolling
reads them.
Stone, we
You
we
should
have.
be reading them all, because you have an influential voice here with a lot of people who have a lot of clout, frankly.
Well,
And-
here we have 63 people, which is a great cross section. How many people does the 63 people on this call actually represent? And I'm sure everybody here turns around and resends a lot of stuff from like freepress.org and everywhere else. But it's information. We're in a suspended state here, and we don't know what's going to come next. Lynn Feinerman, you have a radio show, and MYLA RESON, you're a Force in Pacifica. Lynn, what did you want to say? And then MYLA again, and Dorothy Reich.
Yeah. First of all, most of the youth do not watch television news shows, number one. And number two, they're not watching even free speech TV. They get their news off TikTok and Instagram and wherever else they have plugged in, including whatever Al Jazeera has been able to grab in the way of listeners. That's to say nothing of the fact that we are so incredibly split apart that this radio, the United States' radio network is dominated, monopolized by Jesus people. I mean, fake Jesus organizations, and the news they get is always quote unquote good news. If you go to the South, a lot of people haven't even heard of CNN, and they never listen to anything but what they plug into with Clear Channel and everything else. So it is a huge problem. We are deeply splintered, deeply divided, and I don't know that, I think it's a good idea to think of centralizing a network that has a certain point of view towards the news. And I disagree with Saltman. Democracy Now! Is not quote unquote mainstream. I mean, they have become more mainstream because people listen to them and are realizing that they bring really great news and really great commentary. So I think that even to try and talk about consolidating some kind of network is chimerical. It doesn't add up for me, given how splintered we are. Most generations below the boomers do not get their news on TV.
Well, you got TikTok, I guess. You have Instagram. Is Facebook still a thing? I don't know. I've never been able to operate it, but then you got all the websites that span the whatever, and we're in a real state of flux here. That's the only thing I can think of. David and Carl, you guys have been riding the wave, and we don't know what even the wave is anymore. MYLA, and then Dorothy.
Yeah, I wanted to play off of what Lynn was just suggesting. You mentioned, Harvey, that you have some kind of a goal to have a unified message, and I don't really understand that concept of just a second, Dorothy, you're next. But I don't really understand that concept. But I just wanted to say that, you know, digital media super important. So many people are getting their media off of TikTok and Instagram, etc. But what happens when our tech overlords shut down the internet? Then we have terrestrial radio and print media. And Pacifica Radio has now over 200 affiliate community radio stations that can jump in and provide information to people if our tech overlords decide to shut down the internet.
Well, but would they do that? Well, I mean, the internet is such an integral part of business now. I don't think they can afford to shut down the internet. I might be remote. I guess I could be wrong. They've done it in
But
Russia, right?
but there are places where the internet is throttled and only
Yeah.
certain, you know, only some information is allowed to come through. So, you know, we have to be prepared for that eventuality, even though it's not necessarily likely. And
Okay,
Dorothy, go ahead, Dorothy.
Dorothy, go ahead, and we'll go back to
So
Marlon.
a couple of things. Um, First of all, Reuters now requires a subscription. AP suggests that you get a subscription. And you know, I poke around a lot about in the morning looking for news, and a lot of the local, you get a local feed on some subject, and then you try to get the article, and they want you to subscribe, and I can't subscribe to hundreds of newspapers,
Right.
local newspapers, so it's kind of discouraging. I also want to know, does anybody know what's going on MS Now? They're not having weekend live coverage anymore.
Dave or Carl, do you know anything about what's going on with MS Now?
I read that they're hiring people.
No, they fired what's her face? The
Well,
blonde.
that usually means they're hiring people who work for half price.
Well, it probably
they
in
said that they're not going to have live coverage on the weekend anymore.
they're in transition
They
with
didn't. They
Versant.
had Barack Obama and Michelle Obama over and over all weekend, the interviews.
Dorothy. They're
Yeah.
probably in transition with Versant, which we talked about earlier, that Versant
Okay,
and
sorry.
MS Now are a thing. So, yeah, anything else, Dorothy? I had a comment about.
Go ahead. Well, Dorothy, if you finish up and
No,
then
just
get in.
again, I say Democracy Now! And Ian Masters at Background Briefing is excellent, excellent, excellent. You really need to listen to him.
Right. So, but you know, will there ever be another Walter Cronkite? Will we ever have another situation in this country where a reliable mainstream competent journalist is listened to by the bulk of the American public, to the extent that a president of the United States, in this case Lyndon Johnson, could say when Walter Cronkite turned against the war in Vietnam, say, we've lost America because Walter Cronkite now says get out of Vietnam. Basically, are we ever going to be in a situation like that again?
I think Bob
Yeah,
Woodward,
sure.
us,
What's that?
I think Bob Woodward has something like that kind of standing.
Right. Right. Alison Green is actually using Bob Woodward as a reference in her work and finding ghost voters on the voter rolls that are replacing the real votes. So right now in Russia, they people in the media are starting to deviate from the state line. So there's gas lines going on for miles. People don't have gas. They're not giving it to civilians anymore. Imagine that in this country if that happened here. I mean, you just look at the Russian people, treat them like Americans, and see what's going on in Russia, and put that same situation here. It's just unbelievable.
Well, but Russia, you know, Putin successfully throttled the internet. Is that correct?
Yes,
Well,
he cut off
Carl
Telegram.
Grossman-
Even the soldiers were using that for defense, and he cut them off like that.
Carl Grossman, you've been in Russia. I mean, you know, what's going to happen next with the media in Russia?
You're
You're muted.
Well, you know, I don't think they need the media in Russia. They're bombing Moscow and St. Petersburg. I think the people can see the smoke.
No, no, there's Dorothy, don't go too far out there, but
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
They
Well, they
do have
continue
media in
smoking in
Russia.
Moscow and St.
They
Petersburg.
have
Word
people.
will get out. Word will get out to the.
They're-
to
they're-
the-
This is a radio show, not a shout down. So let's all
Yeah.
take our turn.
Yeah,
Carl, go ahead. Carl, and then
in terms of
CBS.
Russia, I've had some familiarity with Russia. Alexei Yablokov, who was the environmental advisor to Gorbachev and also Yeltsin, invited me to give presentations. And I ended up 7 times in Russia, all over the country. I wouldn't go back there on a bet with Putin, but I saw the beginnings of a free press. I started going to Russia in the late 80s, and I saw the beginnings of a free press and a kind of a democratic system, certainly with Gorbachev. But with Putin, Yablokov, who I mentioned, Alexei Yablokov, who was there, Rachel Carson, the leading environmental voice. Last time I saw him, he had given a speech at the UN, and I met him in the Manhattan, and he was talking about being followed in Russia. In terms of, for what it's worth, what I do is to use all means possible. For example, with television, what I do with my show on Free Speech TV, or my director does, is we have a half an hour show, but then we take, because we know the attention span of young people, break it up into 5 or 6 interstitials. And those are shown, often right after or before Amy's show. There's very conventional weekly newspapers in the New York metropolitan area, particularly here on Long Island. I have a syndicated column, which runs in then every week for the people who draw from a newspaper. Believe it or not, some people still read. I've written 7 books. I'm on my 8th now. So again, by all means possible, from the journalism end, you try to reach people. But again, just to repeat what I'm saying, it's a move on. Go check out what Orban did in Hungary, or what Putin has done in Russia.
Yeah.
Any of these authoritarians, because they know. Just one more minute. From an academic point of view, the press has been divided. This is the way the academics see it, as the authoritarian media, which serves the state and has trusts and corporations got to serve them. And then what's called the libertarian media. And the libertarian media is supposed to fulfill the ideal, not always fulfill, to say the least, of being a check, being a watchdog on government, and during the muckraking era, expanded to the trusts. But these days, again, it's the libertarian voice to provide a variety of opinions. In fact, it's Milton is kind of an architect of a marketplace of ideas, to provide the marketplace of ideas, to challenge power, to take on power. That is under siege in this country. And those who are doing the sieging, they're not kidding.
Carl, did you know Bill Mandel?
No.
Bill Mandel
okay.
been to Russia. He was a Russian person back in the day. He's the guy that stood up to the McCarthy committee.
Okay.
There's a great video, but anyway, thanks.
Okay. Steve, is that we're gonna move on. This is a discussion that we're gonna have to continue to have. The other question was, of course, we have had on this broadcast people reporting to us from places like Ukraine, and they're giving an alternative. How do they compare to people who used to go over from the news networks and report on the ground? For example, if God forbid the Vietnam War was still going on, who would supply the real reportage from a place like Vietnam, which we now have Gaza and we have Ukraine, And who's giving us our facts from those places? I mean, Dave, when you were at CBS, you would send out trusted reporters. Now we get, yeah, this guy in Russia. I mean, I watch on YouTube. I watch the reports from Ukraine. They all tell me that Russia is about to collapse. How, how credible is that? How do we evaluate that? That's a real question. Carlos Sand, and then anybody else want to jump in on this? It is a completely critical discussion. Go ahead, Dave Saltman, and then Carla.
I just happened to have watched that
Okay.
thing you just showed, and I thought that guy was absolutely brainless. He didn't know a single thing about what was going on in
What?
Ukraine, in my opinion.
Really?
Anyway, this is Carla, and I want to go back to that Russian story because I drove a little green German VW into Russia in 1969. And let me tell you, you do not take Time magazine, you do not take anything in writing at that time. And they check you before you go in and where you come out, and they tell you what you can have. But I want to tell you that I was just in Cuba a couple of months ago, and they do the same thing. So that's how they control what the people be able to read and write, and the internet. I don't know how they do that, but that's very limited with their amount of electricity they have or whatever. So it's very
Well, the
easy
question
to
then
do.
is, so I watch these things on YouTube every night. After I watch the highlights of the Dodgers game, I watch environmental stuff, I watch Ukraine stuff. How do we evaluate what we're seeing? Well, at least with CBS and NBC back in the day, you knew that these were professional reporters who were reporting to guys like David Saltman and Karl Grossman. How do you now today evaluate what you see on the internet? That's a critical question.
It's all
You know?
about trust. You're absolutely correct.
David, I got a bone to pick with you.
All right, go ahead. Let's go, Steve.
Yeah. So that video, the kid that you see there, he's he's on the front line. He like went into towns where they're being bombed by drones, and they'd hear a drone, they'd go run and hide. I mean, he was actually on the front line in Ukraine.
This
You
is
got to,
the blue-eyed kid.
yeah.
What I heard was all about how great he was. He didn't give a single. Maybe I was just caught a
Did
bad.
you seen the part where he's talking about going to where he's traveling around to different countries in Europe and finding the Russian important people that are trying to make Russia look normalized in civil societies, and he would out them and confront them on the spot. Now tell me that isn't journalism.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to have to continue this. Dave, go ahead, and then
I'm just saying, I just saw that one, so I may be.
All right, so listen, we're not going to beat next week, but the week after, the critical question we need to think about: who is credible that we see on the internet? Because the mainstream media, the credible, the professional, the reliable media has collapsed, and it's been on purpose, but also just from the nature of the internet. We're going to have to come back, and including people on this call. We've had 270 people, 270 installments of 2 hours each on these calls. Who do we believe? I mean, who is credible on these calls? We had great reportage from Ukraine, which I thought was very credible, but we're going to have to deal with that going forward. Dave Saltman, Karl Grossman, do you want to have final words on that?
Well, you've explained why Walter Cronkite was successful. He was the most trusted guy in America.
But why was he trusted?
Because he didn't lie. He did his best, and he wasn't afraid to change his mind. When he decided he was wrong, he yelled at you about Vietnam, and then
he yelled at me about 3 Mile Island. But that's okay.
I thought it was Vietnam.
No, it was 3 Mile Island.
And I stand corrected. But he changed his mind. He was for the war. And then, because this was the first war where American journalists were actually embedded with American troops, the truth of it wasn't that difficult to find out, And remember, CBS then had this massive lawsuit, George Cryle versus General Westmoreland about the accuracy of the body count. Accuracy is the key word in all of this. And
But how do you determine accuracy?
well, it's not that easy sometimes. That's what a good journalist knows how to do.
The Steve Bannons of the world have very explicitly targeted the good journalists.
Yeah, he's not stupid.
Right.
Actually, here, just to button this up with stuff that I think you were interested in, if you look at the Steven Spielberg movie about the Washington Post, the one called The Post, Meryl Streep playing Katharine Graham, her board members are the bad billionaires, let's call them, and they wanted to silence Daniel Ellsberg and not put the Pentagon Papers in the Washington Post. And Kay Graham, to her credit, said, no, it's my paper now. We're going with it. And then they went public, and she got a new board member, and her new billionaire was a completely different guy named Warren Buffett, who became her media advisor until she died. So I'm saying when it comes to billionaires, there's two kinds of billionaires.
At least,
Carl?
Carl?
Just like to add, as we conclude this discussion, a positive note. Exciting me is when I send stuff to Counterpunch, to Nation of Change, to Op-Ed News, to Daily Cost, these internet sites, and you don't have to conform to the mindset of the magazine that you're writing for or the newspaper. I write a piece sitting here where I am now on my lazy boy, send it into Counterpunch, and it's utterly amazing. 15 minutes later, boom, it's online and read all over the place. Not with the not like a story in the New York Times, but it reaches a lot of people. That's exciting. The internet affords, but how long will this last? A freedom of the press that, frankly, is more than I've ever seen.
There you go. Carl and I just, by the way, have a piece we just put up at freepress.org. And I will tell you that in 2004, when Bob Petrakis and I were breaking the stories about the theft of the election and the miselection of George W. Bush for a second term, and the Democratic Party did nothing. Nonetheless, freepress.org got the story out and did help start the movement for election protection. And, here we are, Carl and I, all these years later, still putting out pieces on freepress.org, and Steve will put up the link. And certainly the anti-nuclear movement has been dependent on this, all these independent websites, and that's where I want to go. Yeah, there's an original piece way back when. And we want the Solartopia network to carry the truth about renewable energy. And I will have to say that I have been reading every day, at least one new piece about renewable energy on the internet that contradicts everything that Trump and Bannon have to say. So I don't know. Let's revisit this in 2 weeks. Dorothy, Mickey, and then we're going to move on, and Lynn. And we're going to go to the Supreme Court today. But this has been a fascinating discussion. We're going to have to continue it. Dorothy,
a couple other good sites. Drop Site News, which is Jeremy Scahill and company. The Intercept is still doing good stuff. Howard used to have this woman go to a site called Empty Wheel, Marcy Wheeler. And she's very interesting. She's a little sardonic like Howie was, but she does some really good coverage. There's just so many good sites. Ken Klippenstein's doing a lot of good work.
So then the question
becomes, is doing a lot of good work. There's so much out there, so much great reporting out there. And I think Amy reported today that the time between a recruit is hired now in the Russian army and the time that they die is 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
So this is going to get around. This will get around in Russia, when
Well, the question then becomes, what is the sum of our parts? There's no doubt there's a tremendous number of great websites and great Zoom calls like this one. What does it add up to? That's the question. What can we match the power that CBS and CNN used to have? There you go.
Well,
Dorothy, what do you
what-
think? Mickey Leader
I
and
think
then
we
Lynn
need to
Finer?
share the information we have with our lists and hopefully get it further out or get a Substack or
But
whatever.
we're not in the millions. We can't go to 9 million. Stephen
Well, but
Colbert, maybe.
I think that little by little it gets out,
I
just
hope you're right. I hope you're right. Mickey Leader, what do you want to say to that? And then Lynn, and
You
then
hear
we'll move
me?
on.
You hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay.
Mickey, quickly, please.
My husband has been telling me for 2 years that, because Trump told us this, that he was going to um, basically declare that we're in an emergency and he is going to hold off all elections. And, when I say this, I have to be careful who I say it to and where I am because they think I'm nuts. And beyond the pale here is I worked so hard in New York State with our small group to try to get the legislators, the Democratic legislators, the assembly people, to pass and put it up for vote and budgeting all of the election protection information that we had researched so carefully. Make sure that we have ballots, paper ballots. Don't buy the machines, they're manipulable. Protect people's rights to challenge their election, the results of their election, and how many people have to agree to recount. All of that stuff is such bureaucratic bullshit because that doesn't matter at this point. We're a year too late to be doing it, and it didn't matter who I called. They didn't want to hear it. And the person who just won the Democratic uh, uh, primary in my district, when approached to be all of with these issues at one of her debates, said, "Oh, don't worry about it. AI will take care of everything."
What's her name?
Kate Conlon, the one
Okay.
who she works for the AI companies.
Right.
So
Okay.
Thank you, Mickey.
it's
Please, everyone, don't swear. We are a radio
Oh yeah,
program.
Steve has to edit it out. Lynn Finerman, and I'm going to give Dave and Carl the last word, and we're going to go right into election protection because the Supreme Court issued some really interesting and crazy decisions today, and I want to deal with them real quick. This has been a fascinating discussion. Salty and Carl, you guys are irreplaceable. Thank you so much. Lynn and then Ray Lutz has a lot to say about election protection, and then we'll let Dave and Carl finish this up. But it's been really incredibly interesting. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, speaking of election protection, for decades now, numerous groups of people have been trying to expose to the media, and we're talking about this media connection to the media, that the entire right-wing monopoly of election voting systems and voting equipment has been used to place Republicans in office who did not win, starting at least from Reagan. And one of those groups that have been working so hard on this and have been absolutely suppressed, squashed, and ignored by the media is This Will Hold. This Will Hold has been doing in-depth research on what the capacities are of Elon Musk's everything, satellites, computer control, Palantir connections, that are basically making our elections moot and taking away the voice of the people. And so one of the biggest problems is that they've not been able to get any media to pay any attention to them. and they are always classified as conspiracy theorists. You know, I went on to talk on a Sunday show, KPFA, and I explained this. And, you know, John Nichols was talking with Philip Muldery, and Philip turns to John and he says, "What do you think, John? Is it paranoia, conspiracy theory?" Immediately, you are cut out psychologically. But John Nichols was smart. He said, "I don't know." And the reason why he said that and continued with a cautionary tale of how we are being ripped off in every one of our elections is because John Nichols is willing to open himself up to the possibility that, in fact, our elections are entirely controlled by that right-wing monopoly of election owners and all their machines, and that Musk and Thiel are deeply associated with them, all of them. Eaton Corporation, you name it, Dominion, now Liberty Vote, they're all extreme right-wing. There is a right-wing monopoly on all those machines.
You're right. And Ray, let's quickly, can you give us a quick a take on that? And
yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about this media question. I was listening carefully. Let's face it, shows like Colbert and Jimmy and the like are the reason that they are being attacked is because they're so effective. I mean, they are very effective. People love to watch them. They're funny, and they do a good job of getting a lot of information out. I think we need to focus on the fact that the most important media today is the cell phone. We have to focus on how to get into this device that now everybody is carrying and not focus so much on radio because it's not going to get through there. Not focus so much on TV. People are not watching it as much. But people are really working on that. So I won't go into detail there, except I want to also change the focus a little bit. This happened to me a while back when I started Citizens Oversight. I noticed that you could either try to get the message out, and this is what you're talking about. Let's get the message out to people, and then will change their mind they'll listen to what we have to say. That'll change their mind. Then they decide to vote differently, and then those people are not corrupted by the system, and they get into office, and then they'll do something different. That's a very long chain. Not that we shouldn't do it, but that's a very long chain of events. And instead, we started focusing on direct action. How could we take direct action, say no to something? And I swear to God, we'd go into meetings and say, I disagree with that. And they'd have to write down, the public didn't like this. I mean, only one person stood up and said they didn't like it, but it represented everybody. And there wasn't enough of this going on. So that's a different point of view, is instead of worrying so much about getting the message out to people, another thing would be to take more direct action. Okay, that's enough for that.
Okay,
Thanks.
well, today nobody knows more about the mechanics of an election than Ray Lutz, and we're going to come back to that in a while.
Okay.
On the media side, Dave Saltman or Karl Grossman, do you want to throw something in before we move on? Because I want to talk about the Supreme Court decisions today, which are very important. Dave or Salty? You want Karl or Saltman?
I yield my time to Karl.
You can't ask for perfection on this in this life. And just quickly, the biggest media disappointment I ever had, I was inches away from getting a job as a producer at 60 Minutes. My professor at New School, who was a senior producer, was trying to get me in and so forth. And then I had done a documentary, 3 Mile Island Revisited, and Don Hewitt somehow had seen it. And he calls me up and he says, I saw the documentary. We've not reported on these $1 million payoffs for folks, suffering for something and so forth. And But you have this guy named Harvey Wasserman in the video carrying on about radioactivity. I mean, and then I said, Mr. Hewitt, that's the issue, radioactivity. He didn't get it. So even as I mourn what's happened, and I really do, to the leading investigative journalism program on major television in this country. And
yeah, well, you know what happened? You know what? Don Hewitt obviously mistook me for Harvey Weinstein. and that's what happened. I got to tell you, the pinnacle of my media career was I was on the Today Show, and they had I said on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel, and right up to the very minute the cameras turned on, Bryant Gumbel and I were talking sports. We were talking about UMass basketball and Dr. Julius Erving, and then the camera goes on, and I said the people were killed at 3 Mile Island. Exactly what you and I talked about that got you not hired at 60 Minutes. And so they had me back on to debate a guy from the nuclear industry. And the pinnacle of my career, when I really knew I made a difference, was after 7 minutes of debating a guy from the nuclear power industry, they turned off the camera and he picked up my book and threw it at me physically. And it was a big book, and he really could have hurt me. But that was it. And Karl Grossman, I know that you understand that. But I got to say, the media, well, my main source, a big source of my information now comes from shorts on YouTube, 10 to 20-minute features on YouTube. And they are filled with breakthroughs in renewable energy. Now, maybe I'm, locked in on a certain wavelength or whatever. And I also want to say that Dave Saltman and I have met with a guy named Bruce McKenna. And I told him I wanted to make a documentary film about the rise of renewable energy. In other words, Solartopia. And he says that what I need to do is use AI and make a 2-minute piece on the takeover of renewable energy, and that we would put on Instagram, and that would be the sum total of what I need to do to promote renewable energy. And my wife is yelling at me because she thinks I'm a great writer. We're married for almost 40 years, so she doesn't want me to stop writing, and she wants me. And I said, look, why write an article anymore if it's all about a 2-minute YouTube? And I don't know, Karl, you and me, we've had a great run writing articles, and Salty, you and I have had a great run doing this and that. Does it all boil down now to a 2-minute piece produced with AI? Is that where we're at in this world? I don't know. Steve Caruso, and then I want to jump in and talk about the Supreme Court today.
You're going to be a little short on facts like David was talking about with the Russian guy. In 2 minutes. So you got to back up. I mean, people are always saying, oh, this happened and that happened. It's like, what's your source? Where'd you get it from? How, you got to follow the chain of custody and logic there. And people just don't get it. Don't do AI videos. Do not. Please. I'm ending up with tardive dyskinesia because the guy sits there with his hands and he keeps doing the same repetitive motion over and over again because I could do this. I could release this on YouTube with AI enhancements. I ain't going to do it. I'm sorry.
Well, listen,
there's no natural rhythm. It's like you're taking your whole existence and just turning it on its head because there's no rhythm with the cosmic mind. It's just not,
All right. Well, we were going to have John Brakey was supposed to come on today. I don't know what happened to John, but he is using AI to make a whole series of stuff on election protection. We're going to have to come back in 2 weeks. And here we go. Lynn is saying no AI, no AI, no AI. I don't know. In 2 weeks, we're going to return and discuss it. And it will not be on AI. Salty?
It undermines your case. Let me tell the dirty little secret here. I've seen the Bruce video too, and this is going to be your calling card. He's got a silverback gorilla on the streets of New York City with a little GoPro camera hailing a taxi. And he gets,
Well,
gets
here
in
we
the
go.
taxi, gets off at he says, let me off at Central Park West.
Well, listen, we're going to return to this in 2 weeks. We need a break. This was an amazing discussion. Carl, David, you guys are national treasures, and Ray Letts too. So we're going to return to this, everybody. We still have 59 people with us. It's fantastic. I want to segue very quickly. The Supreme Court today did something that's completely bizarre. Not that that's anything new, but this was a whole other level. On the one hand, the Supreme Court decided, I believe it was 6-3, and this is staggering. They said that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, which makes me puke, has the right to fire the heads of regulatory agencies without cause. That includes the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as Karl Grossman well knows. He fired the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Supreme Court has ruled that the President of the United States has the legal right to fire the heads of regulatory agencies without cause. I mean, does anybody understand what that means? We no longer have any effective regulation of anything in this country. If the President of the United States can fire the head of a regulatory agency at will, it's insane. At the same time, and this is also in the news today, which I believe is reliable, the same time, the Supreme Court ruled that he could not fire and not investigate and not remove a commissioner of the Fed, of the Federal Reserve, which sets interest rates.
It all depends where your money's at, right?
Well, I mean, that's amazing. So on the one hand, Trump wants the Fed to lower interest rates. He wants to get rid of the guys on the Fed who don't want to lower interest rates, and the Supreme Court said he can't do it. On the other hand, all the other regulatory agencies he can fire without cause. Is this Alice in Wonderland? I mean, are we completely crazy? I will say also, I'm going to call on Alison Green, who specializes in election stuff. The Supreme Court ruled today that the states must accept ballots that come in late if they're postmarked on time. In other words, if you mail in a ballot on election day and it's stamped on election day by the post office and it gets to the election board late, they have to count it. Now, what that means, the bigger meaning here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Allison and Ray, you guys know this better than me, that it seems to me means that the Supreme Court is not going to abolish mail-in voting. If they're saying that the states have to accept ballots in the mail that are postmarked on time but arrive late, that means they're not going to get rid of mail-in voting. To my understanding. Alison Green, you want to comment on that? And then let's, if that's true, that's a very big deal because Trump wants to abolish mail-in voting, which means you have to show up in person, which means the Bannon and the Ku Klux Klan can intimidate everybody casting a ballot. If you can mail in a ballot, you can't be intimidated by the Klan. But what do I know? Alison Green, you want to comment on that? Why did the recording stop?
No idea.
If you can, okay, there we go. Thank you.
Somebody's got playing with
Okay, go ahead, Allison.
So I actually wanted to say, I think that it's a very narrow decision that they made. They made the decision that mail-in ballots can actually be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they said mail-in ballots can be accepted if they've been postmarked by election day. So this is actually really interesting because it gives everybody the narrative that they're shooting Trump down.
All right, keep going.
and they may actually be, um, but I don't know that we've actually heard the final words on mail-in ballot. There is still a lot that is going on against mail-in ballots. So I'm not sure that we can go and say because they've been willing to count votes that come in as long as they're postmarked beyond election day, which is what Trump was trying to do. Say, forget it. All of those ballots, forget them. And if you've got it mailed in, I mean, he's also tried to take over the post office. So of
Right.
course, he slows down the actual mail-in ballots through his dominance of the post office and then says let's not count those votes. And that's the piece, I think, that very narrow piece. Do you agree with that, Ray Lutz, that it's that narrow piece that they determined today, correct?
Yeah, but I do think that it's sort of a pickle that they're in because when the anti-vote by mail people, they're also pro-military. So you say, well, does that mean we're going to not accept the ballots from the military by mail? And they go, well, I guess mail is okay in that case. And so we are going to have vote by mail. And now the
Well,
question is,
that has not been clear until today.
well,
Trump
no,
was
I mean
had vote
for
by
the
mail
military.
very much in play, right?
Well, it's in play in terms of people talking, yapping about it. But the question that I'm trying to answer is what's going to happen. And I'm trying to predict the future and say, I don't think they're going to abolish it because of this factor. And also because a lot of people rely upon it. But what's going to happen, the reason they're doing this is because people have the idea that vote by mail is so dangerous and it's ripe for fraud and all that. But again, so is in-person voting, as you mentioned. If you have ICE squads around, if you have the KKK or whatever, if you have long lines that are sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours long trying to get into in-person voting, that's a big way to fraudulently manipulate the outcome as well. And whereas there's short lines in the places that you want them to be short. And so vote by mail also is really important for certain people who can't make it to the polls. They're not mobile. And so they're not going to be able to go there and they're not going to be able to vote any other way. So it's really an important thing. And it really isn't that ripe for fraud any more than the in-person stuff is. It's a trade-off, right? They
But
both have their problems.
you're
There's nothing
speaking as if
that's perfect.
you're
But
speaking as if
I do,
rationality mattered, Ray. You're speaking as if we live in a sane universe. Ironically, as you well know, historically, the majority of vote by mail is Republican.
that used to be, yeah, until recently, then it kind of flipped around. Um, used to be majority Republican was vote by mail, and then Trump made a big deal about it that it was you should go in. But of course, in the states like Oregon, Washington, California, and Nevada, Colorado, it's most all vote by mail anyway. But
Well,
in
yeah,
California now,
wasn't Oregon 100% vote by mail?
it is. But I mean, you can go in and vote in person. But I mean, even California, which is optional vote by mail, it was 93% in the last election. Just this last election was vote by mail. And so it was only 7%, right? So that's not that much that is in-person voting.
Well,
Now to say we're
I
gonna,
voted in Los Angeles. Good luck finding a drop box.
Hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
if you want to drop your mail, if you want to actually bring your ballot in, lots of luck. I mean,
We
you're
didn't
gonna,
have that problem here in San Diego. They have them pretty, most libraries have them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's
that's true.
where we drop them because it is
Actually,
better than putting it in the mail.
I was thinking
These
more of
days, because
Ohio.
guess what? We're going to have filtering by apparently by the USPS. That's a big danger as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really, first of all, I think that there's so many things that Trump is throwing at the wall. He's trying to kill off our elections by, death by 1,000 cuts. And I actually have been finding that there are a lot of these, we've talked about the ghost voters. Well, I think mail-in voting is reliant, he's reliant on mail-in voting to get some of the ghost voters' votes in. So I think he utilizes it as much as anybody else. And I think that he's kind of trying to distract us by claiming he's going to shut it down. But as Ray just pointed out, there's been an attack since Trump 1.0 on the United States Postal Service.
Right.
And
No, it
so,
was before him. I mean,
yeah,
the Postal Service has been under attack for a long time.
right. But he's
And by the way,
specifically,
before we lose track
yeah.
of that, Allison, I want to explain one of the reasons. There are a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons the Postal Service has been under attack is because it's the most unionized institution in the country. You have two very large, very powerful unions dominating the Postal Service, the National Association of Letter Carriers and the American Postal Workers, who are the clerks. And that is one of the reasons why the right wing hates the Postal Service, aside from other issues.
Absolutely. And they're very powerful, and they are trying to contain Trump on what he's doing with mail-in ballots as well. The union is very much not in step with what the powers of the United States Postal Service that Trump's put in place are trying to do. And I mean, I watched the union leader from one of the two, I can't recall which, but I watched him and speaking to everything just 2 days ago. He did a great video, speaking of 2 or 3 minute videos, where he said that they're trying to commercialize the United States Postal Service, but it is not a commercial entity. It is a service, and it
Right,
is not for profit. It is one of the original not for
right.
profit services. So yes, the unions, I think, are actually very much going to help us deal with what they're trying to do with using the mail to slow down or diminish certain votes. And I think that, I was saying that I don't know that this very narrow kind of decision by the Supreme Court will protect the whole of the mail-in ballot issues that are coming up. I do agree. I think that Ray and I are on the same position that mail-in balloting is, I think, going to be in place for this election. What its future is, that's to be determined.
Well,
But
but correct me, but my initial response when I read that the Supreme Court voted in favor of allowing ballots in after the deadline if they're stamped on time is that they're not going to allow the abolition of mail-in voting as a whole.
I agree. I mean, I don't know that I took it from that Supreme Court decision per se, but I agree with you. They're not going to take away mail-in ballots, at least for this election.
And
I don't think it's
the
going to
other
happen.
great thing about mail-in ballots, which is unspoken, is that mail-in ballots are on paper. And so it circumvents a lot of the voting machine mishigas, right?
Okay, so that is something I would like to speak to because I actually did a tremendous amount of public record requests. And what I actually found was that I looked at the batch tallies of the votes that were coming in, and they're basically in three, although I would say 3.5 buckets, okay? There's the absentee ballots, which is the mail-in ballots. There's the early voting ballots, and there's the election day ballots. And what I could see from the tallies, there's a chain of custody that says that all of these batches of votes have to be in sequential order. And what actually happens is that the mail-in ballots, it follows sequential order, okay? Every batch of votes is accounted for. But in my county of St. Lucie County in Florida, which is actually famous for having Russian interference, the early voting and the election day voting, it had the sequential numbers, but there were batches of votes missing from the tallies. And to me, that is completely questionable because, so in other words, if you had 100,000 let's say, just picking a number, if you had 100,000 votes that were counted, I could see from the public records request, which was information that is I requested and I got from the back end systems, that shows that that 100,000 number is missing 23 batches of votes. Those 23 batches of votes could have 700, 800 votes in them, could have 2 votes in them. There was no way of knowing how many votes weren't counted. And so, to your point about the mishigosh of the vote tallies, is that in 3 buckets, and I mentioned 3.5 because there's also provisional ballots that come after, but the mail-in ballots, they seemed to be legitimate in terms of the counts with no batches missing. The early voting, the election day voting had batches missing. So I do think that they can't mess with the mail-in ballots the way they can with early voting and election day voting.
Well, Ray Lutz, you're the expert here. You want, by the way, Allison, your county of St. Lucie is also famous because you have 2 nuclear reactors there, and I wouldn't live anywhere near them. So you may want to consider moving.
I
Go ahead.
actually thought Judge Eileen Cannon was the neighbor that I had to move away from, but yes,
Well,
okay.
she is also radioactive. Go
Yes.
ahead, Ray Lutz, please.
Well, I do have there is an area where mail-in ballots have been not as good in California, especially because, as you might know, I had a lawsuit in 2016 against San Diego saying that they should include all the later arriving and processed vote by mail ballots in their audit. So dial the clock back. 1960 was when they first started all of these audits. They didn't have many mail ballots at that time or absentee ballots. 1990s, it became permanent in California. You could become a permanent vote by mail voter. Then in 2006, Deborah Bowen, who was later the Secretary of State, senator at the time, put through the bill that said they had to include mail ballots in the audit. Oh, okay, big breakthrough. So, but they interpreted it as only the ones that they had processed conveniently at the time did they have to include. And so in 2016, I sued San Diego and I said, actually, the law says you have to include them all. And they didn't like that, so they actually changed the law during our appeal process so that they could be right. And so up until just this last election, San Diego was still not including any of these later ballots. And it was 285,000 ballots in 2016. Now it was 370,000 ballots that were unaudited, the later set. It doesn't mean that they're corrupt or anything, but it means that they're not being checked. And so anybody that did want to change them could just change the ones that they know are not going to ever be audited. It's stupid. And so this year, San Diego finally came around and said that they would audit a few more. So now we're doing, so that was a breakthrough. That was 10 years in the making. To the day almost when I first filed a lawsuit in 2016, that was on the 17th day of this month when we when we first filed the lawsuit, and then 10 years later, they finally gave in and said we were right all along. So it's coming around a little bit, and we found some data where we're going to be able to review all of the audits being done in California to see how much of a coverage they are, how much they are covering. And I think we can put some pressure on them. So that on that respect, we're making progress. But
Well,
we still
speaking
need
of
to
progress,
get these audits being done and across all of the ballots.
but correct me if I'm wrong, and please, am I correct in saying that if the country is voting by mail, we have effectively moved over to 90+% of the ballots being on paper?
Yeah, that's the good part about it is they're all hand-marked paper ballots and there's no barcodes involved. So Trump has to kind of like, well, I don't want any barcodes, but gee, mail ballots there's no barcode, so I should love them, but I hate them anyway. And you know why? It's so later he can say, "Oh, we didn't get rid of mail voting. I never expected it to get rid of, but he'll say, "You didn't do what I said, and that's the reason that I lost the election. It's all fraudulent. And remember the 2000 Mules video, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to see a lot of this going on in the next little bit. But
Well,
I
of
think that's
course,
the agenda.
it's not so much male ballots he wants to get rid of, it's female ballots, but that's another issue. So,
Oh boy.
Yes, yeah, because I mean,
and
he's
by the
been so
way,
busy getting rid of the black and the brown people from voting. Now he's moved on to the women. Yes.
By
well,
the
the
way,
women are
I have to say before I lose the floor that this other, you know, decision by the Supreme Court to get rid of the independence of these commissions has to go down as one of the most insane things in history. Along the
astonishing.
lines of getting rid of the Energy Commission, which they had to also back out after they realized, oh my God, they're also in charge of all the nuclear waste. I guess we kind of need them anyway. So
How
it's going to,
any sane judicial body could allow an executive the power to fire without cause the chairs of regulatory commissions.
Wait,
It's staggering.
but Sonny, you started that statement by saying how any sane judicial
Exactly.
committee. I
It is
think
a,
that's the point. We don't so and remember this is a corrupted SCOTUS. I mean,
oh my God.
and
Just
look at
wait,
I actually
just
was
wait
going
till he
to
fires Roberts. And he fires Clarence Thomas, and he fires Alito, and then he's going to fire himself.
Well,
Oh,
he
you
won't
know,
start with them. I mean, you got you have three uppity women on the court there. I mean, women
well,
have, they're anyway, it's
but
amazing. Truly
yeah, and
amazing.
what I was going to say, Sunny, though, is I had actually put my hand up originally when you were talking about the Supreme Court. I mean, I believe that one of the commissions that he's allowing them to gut is the FTC. And throughout the prior media segment, all I kept thinking about is I'm old enough to remember when there was this thing called truth in advertising because it was regulated that we had to have truth in advertising. And the reality is now maybe we have truth in advertising, it's everything else that's untrue.
Yeah, right.
And you now have the Democratic member of the FTC who he's trying to fire. So it goes back to our whole media conversation is the Supreme Court just handed him the ability to own the media even more
Well,
so
I
than he
love
does today.
also he sued one of the networks, I think it was CBS, for allowing a comedy show to not have both sides of an election presented. And it was Reagan who got rid of the fairness doctrine. I wonder, do we still have a fairness doctrine that can allow a lawsuit against a network for not presenting both sides? I thought Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine. What's going on here? Lynn Feinerman, go ahead. This is a really amazing discussion. Alice in Wonderland had nothing on the Supreme Court. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen a more egregious decision than allowing the chief executive to fire regulators without cause.
Yeah.
I
Ah,
mean,
it's
that is just
it's
staggering.
fascism.
What's that?
It is total fascism. I mean, it's like just, you know,
Well,
but
he also just signed a treaty or some kind of deal with I think it's Uzbekistan, a mining deal in which his sons are directly invested. I
yeah.
mean, it's not even any hiding it.
influence peddling
He has
101.
been doing emoluments crimes since he entered the White House. I mean, I'm not quite sure why you're outraged. I mean, I guess maybe it's good to be outraged, but you
Well,
know, he's
because
been doing this since he, you know,
but they let him
since
get
he
away with it.
slouched into the White House for the first time.
But
And I just like to say one thing, and that is all of this is about the attempt to control the voting mechanisms prior to tabulation. That means that everybody who's desperately trying to control their vote and everybody else's vote are completely overridden if and when Musk and Thiel and their ilk take hold of the tabulation, the counts after tabulation. And
Yes,
that is what they are reputed to be doing now. It doesn't
Lynn?
even matter.
You stole the words out of my mouth. Exactly what I was going to bring up. You got the guys from DDHQ, which is decision desk night. You know, the guys on the TV telling you who got what vote. And then you start seeing the Democrat votes actually go down. And this is what a T from This Will Hold has been reporting on.
Yes.
But the whole currency of this whole thing is what Allison's doing, is that they have these fake voters and they replace the real votes, and then the tallies adjust themselves, you know, somehow in Florida and Ohio, and they say, well,
Right,
you
but
know,
according to T, that is all done after tabulation.
right,
That
right.
is what T is also talking about.
It's
What do you mean? I don't
fungible
necessarily agree with
because
that, but-
electrons have no chain of custody. That's the whole point.
Well,
Electronic
it's
voting
also
is
a
the whole
matter
thing.
of, even if they are taking some votes and, you know, flipping the votes prior to tabulation, then they just, you know, wait until the rest of the votes come in. And after tabulation, they get what they want by slotting in what they have collected.
No, they had
and
that figured
taking
out
the
before the
real
election,
votes.
4 hours before the election. Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is, look, I mean, one of the things is that we have been misdirected for a very long time. We know that there's gerrymandering. We know that there is voter suppression on massive levels. Those are all things that are happening right before our eyes. And yet the narrative from the party is that, you know, from at least one of the parties, is that we have free and fair elections. The other choice is we have fraud, and that one party is doing it versus the other. But that's
No.
all kind of distraction in a way, because what's really happening as well is that when you look at the intelligence reports, when you look at the Mueller report, when you look at the ODNI reports from 2016, they all say that the vulnerability is in our voter records. Russia actually targeted voter registration systems in all 50 states, according to the New York Times in 2019. They did not do that for giggles. They did that for a reason. The voter registration records are the element of deciding who can vote and who cannot vote. And they're also suppressing through the voter records who cannot vote and who can vote. And the people that they are allowing to vote are sometimes not real people. And so we've got two halves of we've got the both sides of the same coin, the purging of votes and the adding of votes. I actually, you know, was talking to somebody and they said, how many ghost voters are there? And I basically said, well, how many bots are there on social media? You tell me how many bots there are on social media. What I can tell you is that we ran a report just this past week, and Steve, you know this as well, where we're taking 8 states, okay? And this is not even every county. In one of those 8 states, it's just one county. In 8 states, we actually did a search for all of the people who have a single letter of the alphabet as their first name. Anything from A to Z, okay? I don't know if you've ever like met somebody named Y, but there is somebody on the voter rolls. We found them last night, David. I think I was talking to your son. We found a person whose first name was Y, the single letter Y. Their last name was the single letter Y. There was no middle name, okay? We have found, there you go. Thank you, Steve.
Well, that person was
You-
obviously a philosophy professor.
Why? Exactly. But if you go down to the bottom, and for those who can't see the screen, we're scrolling through all of the voter records of people who their first name is an individual letter of the alphabet. And this one is just one district in Ohio. So you have here 651 different people in one congressional district who have actually their first name is an A,
Yeah,
a B, or a
but
C, or a
Allison,
D.
let me interrupt
Yes.
for a second.
Okay.
This means nothing because a lot of people go by their middle name, and you see the middle name is filled out.
It
I
does.
mean, a lot of
Sorry,
people
I'm going
use
by the law, Ray. The law in Florida, for example, in Texas, is that you have to use your whole full legal name. So to say that if you have somebody
So
named
are
like,
you saying we should purge them from the list because they don't
I'm
have their
saying we
name
have to
right?
verify that they're actually, well, first of all, I'm saying that there was a state requirement for the states to have verified if somebody registered with the name A,
This is
okay?
what people do when they want to purge and get rid of a lot of
No, no, no,
people.
no,
This
no,
is a
no.
right winger kind of purge
No, 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 no.
strategy. No,
This is
I'm
actually,
completely
but you're,
against
no,
this
Hey,
this
Ray,
whole
Ray,
investigation of purging
Ray,
people.
Ray,
It's not a good idea.
let's take turns. Let's take turns because I think you're
Well,
talking
listen,
Okay,
over
well,
this
each
let
is
me
a
other.
have a
really,
turn then. Let me have a turn because Allison's gone along for a long
Yeah, Ray,
time.
walk us through the downside of it, and then Allison is going to tell us how this is an indication that these fake ghost voters who aren't real people are being used to push real people off the having voted. So go ahead, Ray, your turn.
Okay, so the whole ghost voter thing is a theory that's never been proved at all. There's no proof of any ghost voters, and I've never seen proof of this. This is an idea that might be true under certain circumstances, but I'd love to see more hard proof. And to say that this is happening is really not something that I can do myself. A lot of people will do it for clicks or whatever to get more attention. But you
no, no,
got to
no,
be careful
don't go
here.
there, Ray.
No,
But
I'm
that's,
saying, no, wait a second. I'm saying that there's a level of proof that you need to be able to say this is happening. And if someone says it is happening, then we need evidence to say, well, why are you saying that? Not
Ray,
just let them get away with it.
Ray, that's fair enough. You've made a very good point a couple of times, and I think we got it.
Okay.
Allison, I remember you told me that two individuals were actually convicted
yes.
of populating the rolls with ghost voters. One of them was deported, and another one had his. You tell
Correct.
us.
Yeah, so I wanted to address that because there is this narrative that there's no proof, but you actually, I can point to four different cases. One of them is this case that you're referring to, which was brought by the DOJ literally right before Trump took office. This case is in Pinellas County, Florida, and it was where a Russian individual, a Russian national, and an Uzbek national created 132 ghost voters. In this case, it was 132 fraudulent names, okay, that did not exist. And what they found was that 132, those 132 ghost voters, they were all being controlled by the Russian national and the Uzbek national. So there's and the Russian national and the Uzbek national, this is a DOJ. This was the United States against them. They pled guilty to it. You then also have a case in Nevada of a Nevada couple who actually were being paid by an organization. The DOJ brought a case against them in 2025. The couple pled guilty to having created 500 fraudulent voter registrations or ghost voters. They actually had people like Harry Johnson, JHONSON, or Brad Montley, MONTLY. And they said they were actually misspelling the names on purpose. And when we actually go through, so we are going through the voter rolls and we're finding similar situations to what is being processed in the courts. Now, this court case against the Russian national and Uzbek national, nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to talk about it. You know why? It's proof of voter fraud, and they don't want there to be proof of voter
well,
fraud.
listen, we're almost out of time here. We're at 4:05. We still have more than 50.
If I can.
We, Yes.
Can
Well,
I?
wait. I want Dave Saltman and Donna Miller, and then we'll go to you, Ray. We're going to have to devote a more dedicated session to this in a couple weeks. Ray, this is a really, really important and interesting dialogue. You and Allison are completely credible and important commentators on this really important point. So I don't want to deal with it, off the top here. I want to come back to this in 2 or 3 weeks and really get down to the nitty gritty. But it's really an important thing, very critical. And thank you, Ray, and thank you, Allison, both of you. Dave Solomon and Donna Miller. And then we're going to go back briefly. I want to talk about data centers very quickly and balcony solar. Dave Solomon, go ahead.
This question is, I'm hoping it's too paranoid, but I'm wondering or worried that if we really do expose this voter fraud, and it coincides with what Trump is saying too, that there's voter fraud, to what degree are we provoking the possibility that somebody like the Supreme Court might say, okay, let's quit having votes until we sort this out, and not have any voting at all, and which by the way, Trump has predicted.
But
that's a problem.
I think that's what they're trying to do is there seems to be this one side or the other. There can be fraud if we actually embrace the fact that the fraud may be happening by Donald Trump himself, as Jack Smith indicted him for, then, we actually are saying we're giving him the excuse to cancel the elections. If we then take the opposing side and say there is no fraud, it's completely safe, these names are completely legitimate, then we're also
it all boils down. It all boils down eventually to the question: what's the truth?
Exactly. I just want to get to the truth.
That's what the Democrats in 2004 kept telling us. Don't point out that Karl Rove stole the election because then people won't vote. Well, the question is, what's the truth? Ray Lutz, do you want to comment on that? Then we'll go to Donna. And then I want to talk very quickly about data centers.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that Allison brought up those cases. There are cases of people, adding stuff to the rolls. It doesn't quite go to the extent of, also most of the time adding votes for those people, because there's all kinds of people that are trying to get more money for registering people, and they'll put in names to the registration because they get paid for every name that they get in when they register voters a lot of times, and so. But and there's a danger of taking people off too quickly as well. They did studies of states to see how many names were common and how many were repeated, even that had the same 4 last digits of their social security number. And there was a lot of them that would be improperly removed if you just say, well, we're going to remove people that kind of look a little bit suspicious, didn't quite follow the right rules for whether you have a full first name or a full middle name. They didn't always have these laws in place when those records were produced.
No,
and
listen.
It's pretty expensive to go back and make sure. If you allow that, then you'll allow people to make challenges like we had in these recent cases where they were challenging 60,000, 50,000.
Well, that was
votes.
Georgia, and that was obviously the Klan. So we have both Ray Lutz and Alison Green. We have got in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
I want to. Yes, no, I want to return to this. We need to get to the bottom of this. There is a truth on both sides here. I hate to be a both sider here, but this is obviously a case where both sides have truth. The question then becomes, what's the extent of the ghost voting and what's the extent of the purging? And who knows? So we can't do it today.
I just think we got to be careful with what we're doing. There's not a both sides. There's a careful and a not so careful. And so we got to be careful and make sure that we get it right. Because if it was pointed out, if we come out and say that there's ghost voting and stuff, then people go, oh my God, what is going wrong with this? And we may lose credibility.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot.
Let's return to this. We're going to return to this in 2 weeks with both of you. Salty is 100% right there, and we got it in 2004 from the Kerry people. You can't You can't point out there was fraud or people won't vote. Well, but there was fraud. What are we going to do? So here we are. All right, we'll be back to this in 2 weeks. We're almost out of time. We still have almost 50 people with us. Donna Miller, did you want to say something? I want to say very quickly a couple words about data centers, and then we're out of time. Donna?
Yeah, sorry, Sonny. I had another question for Allison. Previously, she brought up that there were some missing batches, but she didn't follow through. That didn't become evidence because she didn't follow through and like get an explanation from the Board of Elections or the Secretary of State for why there were missing batches. I mean, somebody could have dumped coffee on a batch of
Well,
things
that's
and
what
they
they
never got
claimed.
used.
They
So you
claimed in
need
Ohio 2004 that they were missing an entire precinct. An entire precinct was disallowed because they claimed that a coffee urn had spilled on the ballots. I swear to God, they did this in
And Donna, I
2004.
did actually follow up, and I was told that in the middle of early voting and on election day, those batches were used for training purposes. but
Right.
but yeah, because they trained
Well,
them
they
right in the
didn't
middle of
say
all of that.
they didn't explain that it was toilet training that what they were used for.
But
So we
and the law actually said that even if you use a batch for training, you still had for chain of custody to actually, show that it was for training. So we do get explanations like the coffee urn or the training exercise, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept them
Well,
as true.
also in Ohio 2004, I love this. One of the election boards said that they lost an entire precinct because the ballots were mistakenly recycled.
In
So,
Ohio, the boards
Good
of
for them for
elections are run by,
recycling.
in Ohio, the boards of elections are run by both parties. There's nothing that can occur without a Democrat and a Republican at the same time standing together, doing everything. That's the way it functions physically in each board of elections for each county. There's
right,
a
but are they
Democrat and a
really
Republican
Democrats?
doing, so there would have been a whole lot of collusion between the parties in order to pull off any of the stuff you're talking about in Ohio.
Well,
And the other
somehow they
thing
did
is
it.
they all have paper ballots in Ohio. Our machines print out a paper ballot that you
Right.
then put into the counting machine. So we
Right.
have all the paper ballots to back up the,
That was not, that was definitely, Donna, that was definitely not the case in 2004. And,
oh, it is now. Yeah, it is now.
and so anyway, listen, it's a fantastic. We're going to continue this with both Allison and Ray. We couldn't have two better people to revisit this in 2 weeks. It's absolutely critical, and it's also we're almost out of time. It's absolutely critical we go toke up. Ray Lessons, you want to say something real quick? I want to do a
Yeah,
mention.
I just want to say one of the things I'm most worried about is the fact that the Congress has control of whether or not they're going to handle counts a certain way for their own elections. And this was brought up in, I can't quote it exactly, I think it was in the 70s, and actually the Democrats did it. They decided to stop counting the recount at a certain point when they came ahead and they said, we're going to stop now.
Yeah.
And it was actually something that, historians say was a little bit slimy. And
Well,
so
and
it is something that I'm worried about in this election because we have a Congress that will still be in charge during the election, and they're damn sure they don't want to lose this election. So there may be some overreach
I
of
thought
this
that
well,
Congress
and of
toward
course, that
controlling
was
it.
the basis. That was the basis of Bush v. Gore. Was the Supreme Court said, well, it's time to stop counting the ballots.
that's what happened in California with Bernie Sanders. They had like 2 million ballots left to count, and there was, you know, he needed a lot less than that, but they said, "Oh, we're done now." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, they did that. Listen, this is all fantastically important, and we're going to revisit it in 2 weeks. This was the origin of these calls, by the way. The very first time we started with GREEP was about the mechanics of the elections. And I am that's we want to revisit this Supreme Court decision. I am fascinated by it. It's really critical. If in fact we're going to go with an election in 2026 that is virtually entirely done by mail, the hidden reality is it's on paper. And then we have to see how these ballots are going to be counted and when they're going to stop the count, which they did in 2001. I mean, come on, we have a history here. And so we'll be dealing with this in 2 weeks. I want to thank everybody. We still have 44 people with us, for God's sakes. It's fantastic. I do want to raise up, we're going to have to deal with it in depth in 2 weeks on this issue of data centers. Data centers have mobilized the American public like no other issue in recent memory. I mean, as someone who's been fighting nuclear power along with Ray and other people since God knows when, the beginning of time, I had a long conversation with someone today who was born in 1973 when we coined the term no nukes. So, that puts it in perspective. Carl and I know there are a lot of people out there who predate the no nuclear movement, and here we are. But the data centers I wish we had the kind of mobilization against nuclear power that we're having against data centers. And there seem to be as big a percentage of MAGA people who hate data centers as, traditional environmentalists. So it's a very, very big deal. And we're going to deal with that in a couple of weeks as well. So listen, everybody, have a great 4th of July. And I am also going to be fascinated to see who turns out for Trump's July 4th rally as opposed to all the others. And I got to say, in terms of, I have never before been as big a fan of algae as I am now a fan of the algae in what used to be the reflecting pool. The reflecting pool is now the algae pool. And so what can I tell you? And does anybody else want to have a last word here? It's 4:17. Everybody have a great 4th of July, everybody. Steve, did you want to throw in something as we take
Yeah.
it? Ray, you had a hand as well.
Go ahead, Ray.
No. Go
Oh,
ahead. Go ahead.
Al G stands for Al Green. See, he's afraid of Al Green.
Oh, I see.
See, I'm sorry.
You mean Allison Green? There we
No,
go.
well, not yeah. Sorry, Allison.
Sorry, Stephen. I actually thought that the reflection pool was reflecting the swamp.
Oh, there you go. We hadn't
But-
thought of that.
And
And
somebody
just
else
remember-
said that Narcissus in the Greek mythology the whole
That's
thing was
right.
pivoting on a reflecting pool. So
Yep.
That's right. And you got to remember also now that mail-in ballots are probably more secure than female ballots at this point in time. That's the reality. All right, we're going to sign off, everybody. This has been an amazing session. Dave Saltman and Carl, especially, thank you for your chiming in on the media. It's a question, what the future of the media, we will determine on these GREEP calls what the future of the media is going to be. We know now that we have a tremendous diversity of sources in the internet. I mean, you can find anything you want on the internet now. The question is, what is the impact? And CBS had at a peak 9, 10, I don't know how many million viewers. Walter Cronkite had tens of millions, maybe. So we can duplicate the quality of anything that CBS ever did. The question is, what's the impact? And I'm just waiting for Stephen Colbert and all those other guys who had viewerships to come forward and give oomph to an alternative media. And we'll know we're there when these GREEP calls have 7 or 8 million people tuned in. In the meantime, we'll see everybody. I'm going to go out and under that palm tree behind me and toke up. And I urge you all to. Thank you, Steve Caruso, for engineering. Mike Hirsch, MYLA RESON, everybody else, Salty, Carl. I want everybody to look at the article that Carl and I just put out at freepress.org. Thank you, Steve and Pete, for posting it. All right, everybody. No nukes. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks a lot. Good show.
But it was a great thing, a great gathering. And I tend to not call them shows, by the way. They're gatherings as far as I'm concerned. And here we are. So take care, everybody. It's 4:20. Enjoy. No nukes. See you in Solartopia.
Everything is a show, Sonny. This is a show.
I suppose.
And it is a very important one that we get. And
Yeah.
don't underestimate the power
All right.
of
But
having